Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fadwa Wazwaz, and I wanted to discuss with you a verse in chapter 20 of the Quran. It's Surah Taha, verse 108. I'd like to look at this verse in its historical, social, and psychological context because it helps us to understand, like a verse, not to kind of bring it into our world and start to rationalize, but rather to bring ourselves, take ourselves to that time when that verse was revealed and try to understand what was the reality of the time when that verse was revealed so that we can better appreciate the lessons, the knowledge, the wisdom in the verse. So if we can begin, first of all, the verse says, on that day, the people will follow the summoner, the caller, from whom there is no escape. Every voice will be hushed, for the Lord of mercy, Ar-Rahman. Only whispers, Hamza, will be heard. So let's look at this verse and go back in time to the early Makkan period, which is the historical context. Psychological warfare waged by a wealthy, tribal, you might say oligarch, kind of like this aristocracy, social context. And this verse comes terrifying silencing of the human ego, what it will be like on the day of judgment. This is the psychological context. So if we look at the mid-Makkan period, the historical context is the pre-migration. This chapter, Surah Taha, was revealed during a very vital phase in Mecca, roughly 5 to 6 years into Prophet Muhammad's, upon him peace and blessings, public mission. This surah is famous for being the direct catalyst for the conversion of Umar ibn al-Khattab. He's like the second Khalifa after Prophet Muhammad, upon him peace and blessings, second successor. So first it was Abu Bakr and then Umar ibn al-Khattab. May God be pleased with them. So before his conversion, Umar was a fierce persecutor of Muslims. He intercepted the text of Surah Taha being read secretly in his sister's house, and his profound majesty completely shattered his resistance. It's just the way the Quran speaks. Community under siege at this moment in history. The Muslim community was a tiny, physically weak minority. They were being publicly mocked, physically harassed, and socially isolated. They had no political power, no military force, and no territory. Past prophets, stories of the past prophets were given to Prophet Muhammad, upon him peace and blessings, to nurture him about what he's going to face, because you have to look at history to understand your present and your future. So the vast majority of Surah Taha is dedicated to telling the lengthy, dramatic story of Prophet Moses, upon him peace and blessings, confronting the ultimate tyrant, the Pharaoh. Because it's going to be similar to what Prophet Muhammad and his community are facing during their times. There's always going to be a tyrannical force, and they all reason somewhat the same, fight somewhat the same, mock somewhat the same. So Allah reveals verse 108 immediately after wrapping up the historical lessons of Egypt, shifting the audience gaze from the destruction of past tyrants to the final universal accountability of all tyrants. Let's look at the social context of this verse. The environment of Mecca at this time was dominated by a loud, boastful tribal hierarchy. And all tyrants have that type of, again, social context. You could see it throughout. The leaders of the Quraysh, such as Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab, used their wealth and public status to drown out the message of Islam. They held poetry contests, shouted over the Prophet upon him peace and blessings when he tried to recite the Quran near the Kaaba, and ran smear campaigns, calling him a magician or a madman. Another thing to note is the smear campaigns. Tyrants love smear campaigns. They don't have arguments, but they have smear campaigns. The crookedness of society, iwaj, the Meccan society was structurally crooked, as all tyrants have a crooked system. It's built on hidden exploitation, predatory financial system, and a system where the rich could lie, cheat, abuse the weak without any accountability. Basically, one law for me, one law for you. When verse 108 was recited in the streets of Mecca, it was a direct threat to that social, historical, psychological context, that whole matrix, you might say. It was told the arrogant elites, right now, you have the microphones, because they felt like, like if you look at it now, people feel like, we control the media, we control, whatever. So they feel like, what can you do? So the response to them is, well, you have the microphones, you have the status, you have the camera, you have the crowd, but a day is coming where the entire earth will be flattened into a vast wasteland, and your social currency, your social status will be completely worthless. Let's look at the psychological context of this verse. Verse 108 transitions the listener into a state of profound psychological awe, to be in khushu', present. And so the verse shifts from three intense phases. One is the cognitive dissonance. لا إعواج له. In this life, humans use intellectual crookedness, if you ever studied logical fallacies, to justify their bad behavior. So they lie in interviews, make excuses for their structural injustices, put up mental smoke screens. On that day, the angel's call will be so piercing, direct, and structurally straight that all human denial will instantly evaporate. You can't deny reality. The psychological defense mechanisms of the oppressor will completely break down. They will obey the call like sheep, unable to deviate or make an excuse. There'll be like no way for you to say yes. There'll be no choice. It's gone. The shock of cosmic silence. Human arrogance is noisy. They make a lot of sound. They yell. The influencers brag. They have all these algorithms, and they have ways of promoting themselves and getting, what is like the word I'm trying to hear, like getting their stuff to reach millions. Empires drop bombs to assert their presence. So the phrase, it's how they like. It's not just the bombs in terms of killing, but also the bombs in terms of their voice dominates and colonizes everyone else's voice and buries everyone else's voice. Those will be violently flattened by the sheer awe and humility. So now it's like loud. Everything they do is loud, in your face, their presence, you can hear them, they have reach. They could reach from one part of the earth to the next with their reach. But on that day, it'll be like all obliterated. So kind of see that psychological context. There'll be no spotlights. No VIP sections, no lawyers, no tribal networks. Human ego, which spent a lifetime inflating and inflating and inflating itself, is instantly deflated into a total paralyzed hush. So the word hams refers to the lowest possible sound. But to understand that lowest possible sound, you have to recognize what the sound is of tyrants in the world. You know, it's like, it's super loud. Everybody can hear the tyrant. You know, they could, you know, they have the megaphones. They can be heard, you know, whether it's AI or social media or whatever it is, they can make sure that their voice drowns out every other voice. At that day of judgment, it'll be hush. It'll turn to a whisper. So either the faint rustling of feet walking in rows or a desperate trembling whisper. Psychologically, try to get yourself to that psychological context. This shows a complete shift in power dynamics. Here they were strutting around in deception, delusion, thinking like, you know, who can like prevent us from doing whatever we want to do and say whatever we want to say. Same tyrants who used to shout and mock, you know, Prophet Muhammad, upon him peace and blessings, Moses, you know, upon him peace, you know, all the prophets, the poor are now stepping on the tips of their toes. Hush. Terrified to make a sound. So they went from super loud, now hoping not to draw attention. Why? Because of their crimes. Now they want to disappear in the shadows. The divine paradox. The majesty of Ar-Rahman, the most brilliant psychological touch of this verse is the specific name Allah chooses to use, Ar-Rahman, the Lord of mercy. In a scene of such terrifying, crushing majesty, one would expect Allah to call himself Al-Jabbar, or the Compeller, or Al-Muntaqim, the Avenger. Now I have you where I want you. By using Ar-Rahman, Allah signals a profound reality to the listeners in Mecca. And I shared this recently in another post about a different set of verses where we're supposed to remind ourselves of chapter 18 that we're supposed to read every Friday. But the profound reality, you see that throughout the Quran. To the oppressors, it's a terrifying warning. If even the attribute of mercy is so majestic and awesome that it silences the entire universe in fear, how terrifying will his absolute justice be? So they're in hush. To the oppressed Muslims, it's a deeply soothing balm, this verse, because it reminds them that the absolute king is taking control of the courtroom away from the tyrants who were given power temporarily to promote justice. Now he's taking the reins to be giving and hearing cases of justice. He's the very same one who loves them, protects them, and is full of ultimate grace. Chaos of the world is temporary. Quiet justice of the merciful is eternal. So they're not quiet because of the Jabbar or the Avenger. You know, it's not because he's, you know how they try to shut down people's voices in this world. by trying to show their might. Like I keep using the phrase because of Netanyahu kind of summarized the psychology of Zionism, which is, the strong will win and they'll crush the weak. So they were not silent on this day because of God, the Avenger, was facing them. They were silent because of their own internal reality, that crookedness that they are bringing forth. They know within themselves of the crimes that they have committed. So that's why they're in hush. They're facing the merciful, but they know that they're coming forward with crime upon crime, upon injustice upon injustice. And their voices are hush. So I will leave it at that, but I will give verses 105, 107 later. Something to reflect upon how a criminal promotes themselves when they silence the poor or the vulnerable or the unprotected, and how they project themselves as powerful, as compellers, of people who can strike you, silence you, and how when they face the all-merciful, knowing that they have their list of crimes that they cannot deny, how they are hushed. So here in this world, they silence people through tyranny. In the hereafter, there will be silence by the all-merciful, not tyranny, but the all-merciful. But what silences them is their crimes, which they can't deny and they can't escape from. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.